What would you do if, in a single moment, fate placed a life-changing decision in your hands? Would you follow your heart or chase the promise of a better life? For 12-year-old Daniel, finding an expensive, sentimental Rolex on a lonely Los Angeles street wasn't just luck. It was a crossroads. With his family struggling financially, the watch represented an escape from hardship. But when he discovered it belonged to none other than Keanu Reeves, everything changed. Would Daniel do the right thing, risking the only chance to lift his family out of poverty? Or would he follow temptation? In this unforgettable story of integrity, kindness, and second chances, one boy's choice sets off a chain of events that changes lives forever. Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The sun dipped low over Los Angeles, painting the sky in a warm gradient of orange and gold. On a quieter street away from the usual city clamor, Keanu Reeves walked at a measured pace, hands tucked casually into his coat pockets. The distant hum of traffic and evening rush surrounded him like white noise, but on this side of town, time seemed to idle. As he passed an old cafe with a neon sign flickering in blue and red, Keanu paused, pushed open the glass door, and stepped inside. A gentle chime from the entrance bell accompanied him. The interior evoked an earlier era, wood-paneled walls, round tables, and the faint crackle of soft jazz drifting from an ancient radio. Keanu made his way to his usual corner and sat down. A waitress soon emerged, recognized him with a kind smile, and took his order without a word. Moments later, a steaming cup of coffee was placed before him. Keanu cradled the cup in his hands, savoring its warmth. His gaze floated to the watch on his wrist, the leather strap worn and the metal edges nicked from time. It was a Rolex Daytona Paul Newman, but far more important than its brand or value was the engraved message on the back. For Keanu, "My love, never forget who you are." That inscription held memories he'd locked away for years. Slowly, he tightened the watch's clasp, a subconscious habit, then exhaled, took a sip of coffee, and left some bills on the table. Rising from his seat, he gave the waitress a polite nod, pushed the door open, and walked back into the cooling air. Outside, the last traces of sunset glinted off nearby buildings. Keanu tucked his hands back into his coat pockets. His thoughts wandered, and for that reason, he failed to notice that the watch, a tad loose on his wrist, had begun to slip. Taking a slightly longer stride than usual, he dislodged it entirely. The watch dropped soundlessly onto the pavement. Keanu continued on, oblivious to his loss. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a small open-air workshop buzzed with the smell of oil and grease. 12-year-old Daniel was finishing up for the day, wiping his hands clean on a tattered rag. He was short for his age, but made up for it with quick thinking and a knack for repairing things most people had given up on. His father, worn down by years of labor, closed a battered toolbox and let out a tired sigh. "Lock up when you're done, okay?" his father said, turning away to head back into the house that adjoined the workshop. Daniel murmured an acknowledgement and glanced at the heap of spare parts, old gears, and half-disassembled engines littering the table. Though the workshop was humble, it was his favorite place in the world. At just 12, Daniel was fascinated by how machines worked. He rarely owned anything new or fancy himself, but the marvel of taking broken objects and bringing them back to life made every grease-stained day worthwhile. The streetlights had begun to flicker on by the time Daniel hopped onto his bike. Pedaling steadily, he left the workshop behind and ventured into the evening. The city around him felt bigger and somehow quieter at dusk. A breeze ruffled his dark hair as he considered what chores awaited him at home, or how many repairs he and his father might have the next day. Then, a glint on the ground near the curb caught his eye. With a squeak of brakes and a skid of tires, Daniel brought the bike to a halt. Leaning down, he picked up a watch, its metallic face reflecting the glow of the street lamp overhead. Even without specialized knowledge of luxury brands, Daniel sensed this was no ordinary timepiece. It felt solid in his hand, heavy in a way that suggested genuine craftsmanship. The leather strap, though aged, was of high quality. He recognized the style from magazines he'd pored over, daydreaming about rare collectibles. Turning the watch in his hands, he caught sight of the words on the back. In neat lettering, it read, "For Keanu, my love. Never forget who you are." His heart pounded. He remembered that Paul Newman Rolex models were infamously expensive. Some sold for outrageous sums at auctions. Daniel felt his head spin with all the possibilities. This single watch could transform his life, perhaps even allow his family to escape their constant financial struggles. Still clutching it, he glanced around the empty street. No one appeared to be looking for anything, let alone a watch worth what might be millions. Swallowing hard, Daniel wondered whether he was holding a miracle or a moral test. He tightened his grip, torn by conflicting thoughts. Money could solve so many problems for his parents. They could move out of their cramped home, upgrade his father's workshop, maybe even see a brighter future. But there was also the note on the back. "For Keanu, my love." This watch had a rightful owner, one who might be desperate to retrieve it. With trembling fingers, Daniel flipped the strap. A phone number, small, subtle, was etched on the inside. A phone number that might connect him to its owner. Taking a deep breath, Daniel reached into his pocket and dialed. A part of him screamed to hang up, to run home, and keep this gift from fate. Yet he pressed call anyway, uncertain of the chain of events he was about to unleash. The phone rang once, twice, and then a female voice came through. "This is Rachel." "Who's calling?" Daniel gripped the watch more tightly, trying to find his voice. "I found something. I think it belongs to Keanu Reeves." Silence lingered on the other end, as though the person was weighing whether to believe him. Then Rachel's tone sharpened with urgency. "What did you find?" "A watch," Daniel replied, pushing down his nerves. "It has an inscription on the back that says, 'For Keanu, my love. Never forget who you are.'" Rachel exhaled audibly, a sound halfway between relief and astonishment. "You have no idea how important that watch is. We've been looking everywhere for it." "Where did you find it?" Daniel glanced around. The street was quiet, punctuated only by distant traffic. Near a cafe on the west side of the city. It was just lying there on the pavement. Another short pause. Then Rachel's tone grew more personal, almost pleading. Keanu went back to retrace his steps. "But we had no luck. He's been really upset. That watch means a great deal to him." Daniel didn't doubt that. In the short time he'd held it, he sensed the significance. "I thought maybe I should call the number on the strap," he said softly. "You did the right thing," Rachel assured him. "Would you be willing to meet? Mr. Reeves would like to thank you personally." The notion of meeting Keanu Reeves made Daniel's heart pound. Until now, the actor had been just a far-off celebrity. Yet here Daniel stood, watch in hand, about to become part of his life, even if briefly. Yeah, I can do that," he managed. "Great. There's a diner on Main Street that stays open late. Think you can get there in the next hour?" Daniel glanced at his battered bike. He wondered if this was too surreal to be safe, but some instinct told him Rachel was being sincere. "Yes," he answered, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. He hung up the call, the city's lights humming around him like a silent witness. With the watch safely tucked into his backpack, he began to pedal furiously. Each rotation of the wheels felt like a step deeper into a story he never imagined he'd be part of. By the time Daniel arrived at the diner, the sky had fully settled into dusk. Neon lights buzzed overhead, their glow illuminating the sidewalk. He locked his bike, checked the watch in his bag, and took a steadying breath. Inside, the diner was a blend of worn vinyl booths and checkered floors, unmistakably old-school American. A few patrons nursed cups of coffee. At a corner table sat Keanu Reeves, looking unassuming in a simple jacket and jeans. Daniel might never have recognized him if Rachel, who stood beside him, hadn't waved him over. Rachel offered a small, reassuring smile. "Daniel? Thanks for coming." Keanu rose to his feet, his expression etched with genuine gratitude. "So you're the young man who found something precious to me." Daniel swallowed hard, nodding. He reached into his backpack and handed over the watch. Keanu didn't immediately strap it on. Instead, he turned it over in his hands, eyes lingering on the inscription. Then he looked up at Daniel with a smile that spoke volumes. I honestly believed I'd never see this again, he said in a low, calm voice. Thank you for calling. Daniel shifted from one foot to the other, suddenly shy. I just wanted to do what was right. Keanu placed the watch on his wrist, fastening it carefully. Not everyone would have, especially knowing how valuable it is. At that, Rachel lightly touched Daniel's shoulder. We really appreciate your honesty. It's rare. Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope, setting it on the table. When he pushed it toward Daniel, the boy stared in confusion. What's this? A thank you. Keanu replied gently. Daniel lifted the envelope's flap and froze. Inside was more money than he'd ever seen in one place. His mind raced. This could change everything for his family. It was beyond anything he could have hoped for. His pulse quickened as he remembered the nights he heard his parents worrying about bills. Part of him wanted to grab it and run, fix every problem back home. But another part felt uneasy. He looked up, meeting Keanu's gaze. I didn't do this for money. A hint of a smile curved Keanu's lips. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. But accepting it is up to you. Daniel stared at the envelope, heart thudding in his chest. The entire trajectory of his life might change in an instant. A single decision, and suddenly the burdens his parents carried for years could be lifted. Yet his conscience pricked at him, reminding him of the watch's inscription, "Never forget who you are." I need to think about this, Daniel managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded with understanding. Of course. We can talk more in a moment. The boy folded the envelope, his hands shaking ever so slightly. As he slipped it into his backpack, an array of emotions swirled: gratitude, doubt, hope, and confusion. This was only the beginning of a journey he never asked for, but one he might desperately need. A soft clinking of diner utensils echoed in the silence that followed. Keanu sat back, allowing Daniel a few moments to process the magnitude of the offer. Rachel watched them both, her expression gentle but deeply curious about how this would unfold. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. Mr. Reeves, I come from a family that struggles a lot. My dad works so hard in his workshop, but money never seems to be enough. This envelope could fix so much. Keanu listened, not interrupting. Then I hope you accept it, he said kindly. But I also understand if you're hesitant. Daniel exhaled slowly, eyes shifting between Keanu and the envelope now hidden in his backpack. I'm just not sure how to feel. When I found the watch, I thought about selling it. The money would have changed our lives. But it felt wrong. A warm light flickered in Keanu's gaze. That's because you have integrity, Daniel. That's something you can't put a price tag on. Rachel placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. Keanu appreciates honesty above everything. He's known for it. But it's amazing to see it in someone so young. To Daniel, it still felt surreal. He was in a simple diner with one of the world's most famous actors, discussing life-changing amounts of money. Swallowing, he steadied himself. I guess I'm also worried about people judging me or thinking I did this just for a reward. Keanu's lips formed a small smile. Let them think what they will. And I know the truth. The smell of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee wafted around them as a waitress refilled Keanu's cup. Daniel realized he hadn't eaten dinner, but his appetite was drowned out by adrenaline. He allowed himself a fleeting thought. If he accepted the money, maybe his father could finally afford new tools. Maybe his mother could have time to rest instead of juggling multiple odd jobs. Keanu gently broke the contemplative silence. Tell me about yourself, Daniel. What do you enjoy doing? Daniel perked up slightly at the question. I fix things, he said, surprising himself with how proud he sounded. Broken engines, old appliances, anything people would throw away. My dad's taught me a lot about that. Something in Keanu's expression brightened. So you're a problem solver, he said. Some of the most amazing people I've known started by fixing what was broken. Daniel looked down at the worn laminate surface of the diner table. I'm not amazing. I just like figuring out how stuff works. Especially watches, actually. They're so small, but can have hundreds of parts moving in perfect sync. Keanu and Rachel exchanged a glance. Then Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. A moment later, he was typing a quick message, brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, he set the phone aside. You know, Keanu began, leaning his forearms on the table. There's a place in Los Angeles where watchmaking and engineering come together in a really interesting way. I've heard they offer specialized training for young people who show promise. Daniel's eyes flickered with curiosity. A place like a school, more like a lab. Rachel interjected, nodding. A program that can lead to internships, apprenticeships, the kind of path that most kids don't even know exists until it's too late. Daniel's heart fluttered. An internship in watchmaking and engineering? He could hardly dream of something like that. But wouldn't that be expensive? Keanu shrugged. Sometimes the cost is high, yes. But if someone vouches for you, there can be scholarships or sponsors. The boy's mind raced. A sponsor. He looked at Keanu, finally understanding. You'd really do that for me? Keanu nodded, a gentle smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. You return something priceless to me. I'd like to give you a chance to chase something you love. Money is helpful, but opportunity can last a lifetime. The sound of a small group entering the diner pulled their attention away briefly. Daniel noticed how everyday life continued around them. Customers scanning menus, a cook hustling behind the counter, oblivious to the conversation that felt so monumental to him. Daniel, Keanu said softly, there are no strings attached. If you decide you just want to take the money, I'll respect that. But if you want a chance to do something bigger, the door is open. The weight of the envelope pressed against Daniel's mind again. Could he simply turn down the money and trust that some new path would work out better? If he took the money, he'd have immediate security, help his family straight away. But the thought of learning a craft he was truly passionate about, under the guidance of experts, made his heart race in an entirely different way. Rachel sipped her coffee, offering him a reassuring nod. Keanu's serious, Daniel. You impressed him, and that's hard to do. Daniel let out a shaky breath. I don't even know what to say. Keanu just chuckled, warmth in his eyes. You don't have to decide right now. But if you do choose the internship route, we could drive you there tomorrow. You can meet the people, see the lab, and decide for yourself. The boy ran a hand through his hair, glancing at his watch. Well, the watch he normally wore. It was an old digital piece he'd fixed up himself, the straps stitched together with care. It was nothing like the elegant, storied Rolex Daytona that almost changed his life forever. I never imagined my day would end like this, Daniel admitted. Keanu leaned back, nodding. You never know what life has in store when you do the right thing. Chapter 4, approximately 700 words. At dawn the next morning, Daniel woke to the gentle hum of a car engine outside. Normally, he'd be jolted awake by the clatter of tools in his father's workshop or the rattle of the old ceiling fan. But today brought new possibilities. He scrambled to the window and saw a sleek black SUV parked by the curb. His father, looking perplexed, stood on the porch in his worn flannel pajamas, arms crossed over his chest. Taking a deep breath, Daniel grabbed his backpack, where the envelope of money still rested, and headed outside. The driver stepped out, greeted them politely, and glanced at Daniel. Ready? Daniel's father stared, half bewildered, half concerned. Mind telling me what's going on? He asked, looking between his son and the vehicle. This was the moment Daniel had been dreading, explaining that he'd made a phone call, met Keanu Reeves, and was now on the verge of a life-changing opportunity. He took another breath, trying to settle the nerves swirling in his stomach. It's a long story, Daniel began, but I promise I'll explain everything. For now, can you trust me? His father studied him, eyes searching for any sign of dishonesty. Finally, with a slow nod, he relented. Be safe, kid. With that, Daniel climbed into the SUV, the door closing softly behind him. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, leaving his father standing there, still trying to make sense of the scene. The city outside whirred by, tall buildings and crowded streets a blur. Daniel stared out the window, imagining his father stepping back into the workshop, the confusion on his face eventually fading into acceptance. This was something they both needed, a chance. They arrived in a modern part of Los Angeles filled with sleek high-rises. In front of one, Keanu Reeves stood waiting, wearing a calm smile. The building's gleaming exterior bore a sign reading, Los Angeles Institute of Engineering and Watchmaking. The architecture itself was awe-inspiring. Glass walls, futuristic angles, a lobby that glimmered with polished tiles under high ceilings. Daniel's chest tightened with anticipation. Keanu greeted him warmly. "Glad you decided to come." They stepped inside, and Daniel was immediately struck by how different this was from his father's humble workshop. Long corridors opened into laboratories where scientists and engineers hunched over intricate tasks. One glass-walled section housed tables covered in tiny watch parts, gears, springs, and metal components, so minuscule Daniel wondered how people could even handle them without losing each piece. "This is one of the labs where you'd be learning," Keanu explained, leading him down a brightly lit hallway. "People here are passionate about precision. From advanced watch mechanisms to small-scale engineering projects, they do it all." A woman with a warm smile greeted them. "You must be Daniel," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Green, head of the watchmaking program." Daniel returned her handshake. "Nice to meet you." They toured the facility, specialized rooms for mechanical design, 3D modeling software stations, and a workspace dedicated to historical watch restoration. Daniel's eyes sparkled at every turn. He thought of the modest bench at home where he'd learned to fix old engines and battered clocks. This was an entirely different universe, somewhere that could teach him to create, not just repair. Dr. Green paused in front of a workstation arrayed with magnifying lenses and precision tools. "If you join our internship program, you'd start by learning the fundamentals, disassembly, cleaning, recalibration, before moving on to more advanced tasks." Daniel gently touched one of the specialized micro screwdrivers on the table, imagining how it felt to pick apart a masterpiece of engineering and then reassemble it perfectly. "I'd love that," he said, voice trembling with excitement. Keanu watched the boy's reaction with quiet satisfaction. And this is just one aspect. They also do cutting-edge experiments with next-gen clock systems, integrating small electronics, even researching new materials. You could explore any path that appeals to you. A short while later, they sat down in an office lined with glass windows. Rachel was already there, flipping through some paperwork. She looked up, smiling. "Ready for the official talk?" Daniel nodded, though his stomach fluttered. He noticed the envelope peeking out from his backpack and wondered whether this internship would mean refusing the money for good. But the memory of that sleepless night flashed in his mind. He tossed and turned, weighed by the decision. In the end, the idea of building a future skill felt more meaningful than a quick influx of cash. Keanu cleared his throat. "This is a formal offer, Daniel. The program runs for a set duration, and you'll receive a stipend. That's enough to help support your family while you learn. It won't be millions, but it's an honest, stable route that can lead to bigger opportunities." Daniel's heart soared at the mention of a stipend. "So my parents won't have to worry about losing my help at the workshop? I can still contribute." Rachel nodded. "Exactly. The goal is to open doors for you, not close them." Papers were signed, and the arrangement was set. Daniel would intern a few days a week while continuing to assist his father. Keanu agreed to sponsor the additional costs of equipment and specialized courses. It was in many ways a win-win situation. Daniel would gain experience beyond his wildest dreams, and his family would see their finances stabilize over time. When all was settled, Daniel found himself back in the corridor with Keanu, watching white-coated engineers drift in and out of labs. The place hummed with purpose. "Thank you," Daniel said, looking up at Keanu, awe still in his eyes. "I don't know how I'll ever repay this kindness." Keanu shook his head. "You already did. Returning my watch was about more than just an object. It reminded me that honesty still matters, that people can choose to do good." A small grin formed on Daniel's face. "And you reminded me that sometimes life hands you choices that can change everything." Weeks transitioned into months, and Daniel's life took on a new rhythm. He spent several mornings at the Los Angeles Institute of Engineering and Watchmaking, fully immersed in a world of gears and springs, absorbing knowledge from mentors who recognized his keen intuition. Afternoons were dedicated to helping his father in the workshop, though the old building still smelled of grease and worn metal. New customers arrived more frequently, partly due to the community hearing about Daniel's connection to Keanu Reeves, and partly because Daniel had grown even better at what he did. Every now and then, Rachel would drop by, checking on Daniel's progress and making sure the family's finances were stable. The money in that white envelope hadn't been needed for survival because Daniel's new internship provided enough to keep the household afloat. Instead, his family decided to set aside most of it for future emergencies, a nest egg they had never been able to build before. One late afternoon, Daniel's mother sat on the porch, sipping tea. She looked visibly less stressed than she had in years. The lines of worry that once shadowed her face had softened. "I can't believe how much has changed in such a short time," she whispered to Daniel when he stepped outside for a break. Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. For the first time in their lives, there was a sense of forward motion rather than constant struggle. He helped bring in more customers, and his father started saving up for better equipment. Their workshop transformed from a dim corner of mechanical salvage into a place brimming with promise. One evening, Daniel received an unexpected invitation, a technology and innovation event in downtown Los Angeles. Initially, he hesitated. Events like these were for big names and professionals. But Rachel insisted, "Keanu wants you to be there. Think of it as another opportunity to learn and meet new people." Stepping into the sleek event hall, Daniel felt a wave of self-consciousness. He wore his best collared shirt, the only fancy clothing he owned, and still felt underdressed amid the sea of tailored suits and elegant dresses. Large screens displayed cutting-edge gadgets, from futuristic drones to prototypes of next-generation watch mechanisms that integrated digital interfaces. Daniel wandered from booth to booth, eyes wide. He found himself gravitating toward a section showcasing advanced mechanical watch designs, hybrids of classic craftsmanship and modern technology. The creators were more than happy to answer his barrage of questions, impressed by his curiosity and foundational knowledge. At last, he spotted Keanu Reeves chatting with a small group near the stage, looking every bit the calm, grounded man Daniel had come to know. When Keanu noticed him, he politely excused himself from the conversation and approached Daniel with an easy smile. "Enjoying yourself?" Keanu asked, hands slipping into his pockets. "More than I expected," Daniel admitted, unable to hide his excitement. "I saw these new watch prototypes that combine traditional gears with digital faces. They're incredible." Keanu grinned. "I had a feeling that would catch your eye." His gaze dropped to Daniel's wrist. "Speaking of watches, what are you wearing?" Daniel extended his arm, revealing a watch he had made, or more accurately, rebuilt from old parts donated at the Institute. The casing was polished steel, but the design inside showcased a unique arrangement of gears he'd customized. "It's my personal project," Daniel said sheepishly. "I used a salvaged movement, then replaced the face with something I designed myself. It's not perfect, but I'm proud of it." Keanu examined the watch with genuine admiration. "That is impressive. Looks like you're combining your love for repairing things with the new skills you're learning. I can't wait to see what you do next." In that moment, Daniel felt a profound sense of belonging. The boy who once tinkered in a rundown workshop now stood in a luminous room among brilliant minds, exchanging ideas and dreams, all because of one decision to return a watch that could have made him rich overnight. Over the course of the evening, Daniel met influential engineers, designers, and even a few celebrities who happened to be watch enthusiasts. Each conversation boosted his confidence. He realized that while money could grant immediate relief, passion and integrity paved the way for a lasting sense of purpose. When the event wound down, Keanu and Daniel found themselves sitting on the edge of a stage, the crowd thinning out as people headed home. Soft lights illuminated the hall in blues and golds. "So," Keanu asked, glancing at Daniel's watch once more. Do you ever think about what life would be like if you'd sold my Daytona that night? Daniel paused, letting the gravity of the question sink in. He pictured a version of himself running off with the watch, hawking it for quick cash. Maybe he'd have fixed up his father's shop and paid off bills sooner. But what then? He would have missed this entire journey. The mentorship, the new skills, the sense of accomplishment that came from earning his way forward rather than taking a shortcut. I used to wonder, Daniel finally said, voice steady. But not anymore. I did the right thing, and everything else fell into place. Keanu nodded, satisfied. That's exactly how I feel. They both looked out over the quiet hall. In the distance, the last few guests mingled around displays, discussing bold ideas. Daniel knew, with unwavering certainty, that returning the watch had not only been the morally correct choice, it had been the key to discovering a future he never thought possible. As life settled into this fresh, hopeful trajectory, Daniel and his family found themselves surrounded by more opportunities than problems. The act of returning Keanu Reeves' lost Rolex Daytona might have seemed like a simple stroke of honesty, but it led to a ripple effect of life-changing events. Daniel's father saw his once struggling workshop evolve into a steady business, bolstered by positive word of mouth and his son's newly honed skills. His mother, relieved from relentless financial strain, found the time to rest and appreciate everyday moments that used to slip by in a haze of stress. At the Los Angeles Institute of Engineering and Watchmaking, Daniel thrived under the mentorship of experts. Each day fueled his imagination, sparking ideas about designing timepieces that could blend tradition and innovation. He realized that while money might solve problems in the short term, true fulfillment came from pursuing what genuinely mattered to him: creating, learning, and living with a clear conscience. Keanu Reeves, for his part, gained back not only a sentimental treasure, but also a renewed sense of faith in the kindness of strangers. His gratitude manifested in genuine support for Daniel's future, proving that gratitude and goodwill can lead to outcomes far more valuable than any amount of cash. In the end, the watch served as more than just an expensive collectible. It became a symbol of interconnected destinies. For Daniel, it was the turning point that catapulted him from a world of daily struggles into one brimming with possibility. And for Keanu, it was a reminder that, sometimes, a single act of honesty can spark a sequence of events that changes lives forever.